Okay, teachers, what is the worst experience you have had with a student? Or, what is the worst thing you have seen a student do to a teacher?
Story 1. The only thing I can remember is some kid putting LSD in the teacher's coffee. The dude knew it pretty quickly, went to the administrator and said, "Hey, you are going to need to have someone cover my class. I think a student put acid in my coffee. I'm going to go home, trip, and deal with this issue tomorrow." That kid got expelled and jail time. I wish I could remember his name, but it was from a class 2 years before me. Story 2. Bully girl in my third grade class had a sad, scrawny, introverted boy suspended, which led to him transferring schools. On the playground, she was being her bully self, frustrating and embarrassing him, leading him to say, "I'm going to kill you." The bully promptly ran to her mother, who was also a teacher in the school. There was no reasoning with anyone after that, and the kid was suspended. I was quite upset as he came from a difficult home situation, the only child of two older deaf parents. I say it was difficult because he confided that he didn't like being in school but that he preferred it over going home. The poor kid was miserable at school, but it was better than home? Sad. Anyway, his parents had him moved to a different school and he cried. Cut to the following week, having a math relay activity with two teams. The bully lost her part of the competition and another kid teased her about it. She yells at the kid, "Shut up or I'm going to kill you." I was pissed and the game was instantly halted for a little chat. However, with her mother being a teacher, suspension was not even a remote option as a consequence. Shocking. I hope that kid had a good experience at his new school. Story 3. I once had a 7th period class full of very tough, wannabe gangsters that I had painstakingly won over to my side over the course of the semester. They had grown close and were all very proud of their grades, something they had never been before. One day, a new student arrived, fresh from the alternative school. He was very small for his age and I could tell it was probably a big influence on his behavior. I sat him up front and for the next couple of days he joined the class with no incident. On one infamous Thursday, I was writing something on the board while everyone silently finished their warm-up when I heard him suddenly yell out, "I'll fight all of you. I don't care. Come on." I turned around to see this kid jumping up out of his seat, ripping off his shirt, throwing his phone aside and removing his earring. It was a sight I'd only seen on Jerry Springer. He continued to yell and slap his chest, while the hardened street kids of my class, who had probably never turned away from a fight in their lives, stared at him in utter disbelief and surprise. Eventually, our little bundle of insanity left the room and began slamming his fist into a closet door in the hallway while I called for help. Other teachers began to peek out from their classrooms and I just shrugged at them. It took 4 cops to haul that kid off and we never saw him again. To this day, I have no idea what set him off. Story 4. I grew up in a small town in Kansas where everyone knew everyone's business. In 6th grade, several of my classmates, who happened to be boys, went over to our music teacher's house and spied on her through her windows. Again, at her house, in her private time. She was single, by the way, and probably about 27. They saw her having sex with a guy, went and told their parents, who then went to the school board and had her fired. For having sex. In her own house. In her private time. Not at all related to school. That was the worst. I really loved her. She was a fantastic teacher. Story 5. You would be surprised what can happen in a teacher's off time. My mum is a teachers' union worker in New Zealand. She has the most fucked up stories. Basically, this teacher had this little shit of a kid in class, does his best to just make sure the kid did what he was supposed to in class, not be a general complete prick, etc. But this kid absolutely hated this teacher. Dunno why. I was around 14 when I was told this. He ended up going to the teacher's house and threatening his kids at their house after school hours. I think he started doing this sort of shit at the teacher's house regularly. It got to the point when the teacher had enough and hit the kid on his own property for harassing his kids. Teacher gets fired for some bullshit reasoning. Even in your off time you represent the school and can't hit students. Story 6. When I was 15, my high school Spanish class was taught by a pregnant lady. When she was a few weeks off her maternity leave, a fight broke out in her classroom and she, perhaps pretty stupidly, went over and tried to break it up. She ended up getting full-on punched in the stomach by one of the students who swung at another student and missed, but instead of apologizing, he laughed and told her she shouldn't have got in the way. She was okay though. Took the rest of the week off. Baby was fine, thankfully. Story 7. Had a child who had some serious anger problems. Threatened to kill a girl, one of the nicest girls in the class, and then about a half hour later says, "If I really wanted to kill, I would have killed you already, right in front of me too." She has stabbed, pinched, poked, punched, kicked, and spat at every student in the school at least once, is in the principal's office every day, is very manipulative and sucks up to and distracts any authority figure when she gets caught. It's a good thing she was taken out of the school. Kids were terrified of her. Story 8. I once had a student whacked out on crack attack me. Before I could defend myself, 4 students jumped him and beat the crap out of him, saving my ass. The administration wanted me to write up the students who defended me, and when I refused, they said they'd fire me if I didn't. When I threatened to go to the media with the whole story, they backed off. The student who attacked me was not even disciplined, and about 6 months after he graduated died from some mysterious problem. I sometimes wonder if we had prosecuted if he would be alive today. Story 9. I used to be a counselor in a school for kids with behavioral problems. One day a student punched the teacher in the face. I proceeded to move him to the confinement room, empty room with a door, where he grabbed a fistful of my hair and wouldn't let go. Another teacher had to come in and almost break this kid's fingers to get him to let go. I lost so much hair that day. I quit 2 weeks later and have worked in a cushy office job ever since. Story 10. One very difficult student named Lewis unplugged my computer in the middle of a PowerPoint-led lesson. I told him to get out of my classroom and that I was going to phone his mom. He wasn't happy, so he went to the canteen, bought a chicken burger, came back into the classroom and threw it at me. It missed, got mayo all over the place, and got permanently excluded. Story 11. A girl who was on my bus once put an insane amount of laxatives into another kid's Snapple. The Snapple was then shared by 5 other girls. Most of them became seriously dehydrated and started puking/shitting themselves. The girl just did a stint in jail for hiring 2 other kids to beat what turned out to be an undercover cop with baseball bats. Story 12. A fellow professor once asked me to sub for him, and as I presented the lecture, a male student in the front row, "I am female," began jacking off. I'll never forget the look on his face. It was like he was saying, "I can take a piece of you, and there is nothing you can do about it." And he was right. The department was an old boys club, and I knew even in that moment that if I reported it, I'd be branded the bitch and might lose my job. So, I nervously continued presenting, and he eventually stopped after about 3 awful minutes.